In part B of this unnumbered series, we're going to look at what else it takes, apart from a God who is limited in his power, to make a thinking person consider Christianity as a slightly, somewhat almost reasonable alternative to rejecting the silliness of Christianity. Cameron Bertuzzi and Phillip Goff will continue to be our guides. Gentlemen.
One area that I know that you've talked about in the past is your views on penal substitution. Why don't we talk about that? Because you don't think that penal substitution is the correct view of the atonement. Let's talk about that, and then your view, the one that you subscribe to.
Yeah, so, I mean, with all due respect to those who accept penal substitution...
You got to be careful, because William Lane Craig is watching this, and I'm just kidding. I don't know if he's actually...
Yeah, I mean, with all due respect, I very much respect philosophers who defend penal substitution, like William Lane Craig, for example. But for me personally, I do find penal substitution one of the most implausible claims ever defended in all of philosophy and theology. So if being a Christian means accepting penal substitution, I'm not a Christian.
Well, it's not like penal substitution is the core of Christianity or anything, right? I mean, original sin and Jesus's human sacrifice of blood, which allegedly takes away that original sin along with all of our other quite derivative unoriginal sinning, is almost beyond tangential when it comes to Christian theology. It's kind of like... It's like the Force in Star Wars. You can take it or you can leave it out. It doesn't really impact the story.
The ultimate goal of existence is for us and God to exist in a state of deep unity, a sort of deep, intimate connection. To take an analogy just kind of plucked at random, a little bit like the connection between a vine and its branches, you know, a sort of intimate, organic connection. Right? So that's the goal of existence. But there's a problem, right? We're a little bit different from God, right? But we're radically different from God. I don't know about you, but God's the timeless, immaterial, necessary foundation of all being, and we're just essentially temporal, embodied, contingent beings, right? So the two kind of don't fit together.
Yes, It almost makes you wonder, given that the goal of existence is for us and God to exist in a state of deep unity, why God would make us in such a disharmonious state. God could have made us much more like himself, right? According to Christianity, we, or our souls, exist apart from our bodies, so we clearly never needed to be physical beings, and given that goal of deep unity, we never needed a sinful nature. We never needed to experience this kind of suffering either, since that was never a part of God's experience, right?
And the thought is that this closes the gap between God and creation, right? And allows the potential for God and the universe to come into this state of deep unity, like the vine and its branches. That's the view of the atonement that really makes intellectual sense to me, and that kind of resonates at a spiritual level as well.
So let's remember, Goff's God is still all-knowing and all-loving. And according to Goff, the ultimate goal is for us and God to exist in a state of deep unity, which apparently required God to knowingly create a world filled with
This life is filled with an immeasurable amount of injustice and suffering.
Put us through the torture of this natural world, and not just us, but all the animals as well, so that we could ultimately end up in a place where none of these injustices and sufferings exist, so we could finally experience that deep unity. Yeah, that really resonates on a spiritual level, because it's just too stupid to resonate anywhere else.
So basically, my interpretation of Christianity is, right, there's a God who's on the way to making a perfect universe, but the only way they can do that is in two stages, right? In the first stage, God creates an okay universe with the right kind of physics that will eventually evolve life. And then in the second stage, God starts to slowly bring the universe to perfection by becoming more intimately connected with it, sharing in its nature, so creation can share in God's nature, and bringing the two into unity.
All you need to do is watch Cameron listening to this stuff. Even Cameron isn't buying this shit. Who knew that God's motto was, if at first you can't succeed, try again. Even if that includes creating a world filled with
This life is filled with an immeasurable amount of injustice and suffering.
And again, while Goff has taken away God's Viagra and limited his power, we're still talking about an all-knowing, all-loving God. I love how God is on his way to making a perfect world in which animals and every species of human which came before and has since gone extinct is just God's collateral damage. Which makes you wonder why Goff doesn't see Homo sapiens as just another stepping stone in that horrifically long and brutal road trip to God's perfect world. But if Homo sapiens really are the whole point of God's creation, don't you use your remaining omniscience and omnibenevolence to make things a little better? I mean, you don't need to be an all-powerful God to make sure that a different sperm penetrates Mama Hitler's egg, ensuring that Adolf is instead Edith, right? Or how about just giving Adolf a bit more artistic talent, ensuring his painting career takes off? Maybe you just nix the anti-Semitism of the New Testament. It seems if God is on his way to making a perfect world, he definitely took a wrong turn at Albuquerque. Next up, Cameron and Philip discuss the resurrection and ascension. It's a bit long and involved, and I don't really have much to say as Goff embraces Dale Allison's unconventional views, which are pretty far afield from what Christians have believed for the last 2,000 years. Let's just say that Goff isn't buying what Christians are selling. And it's objectively ontolicious to see Goff brush aside those silly ideas right in front of Cameron. Watch the original video starting at the 30-minute mark if you're interested. The link is in the description below.
I suppose, just to bring out the skeptic a little bit, I think in some sense Carl Sagan was right, that extraordinary events require extraordinary evidence. But what is an extraordinary event depends on your worldview, right? Depends on your most fundamental philosophical convictions. I think it's perfectly fine for an atheist, someone starting from an atheist worldview, to expect very high standards of evidence for these things and say, like, I'm just not taking it seriously until I get that. But where I'm at now is this form of Christianity makes intellectual sense, fits with my worldview, fits with a God of limited abilities, which is something I think there's strong evidence for. And so that makes me, open to taking this as a serious possibility.
This is the move these people seem to be making lately. I'll be talking about this at length in another video this month about Ayaan Hirsi Ali's conversion. Philip is right, of course. What one considers extraordinary does indeed depend on one's worldview. If that includes magical beings who can do anything, who are not subject to the causal predictability of our world, then nothing is extraordinary. This is really nothing more than a full-throated embrace of Lobar Bill's lowering of the epistemic bar. Well done, Phil. The rest of the conversation is a lot of yada 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 about which I have really nothing to say. Let me end with this bit from earlier in the conversation.
So here's what I really, really like about your view, okay, is that, well, actually, just considering your view over the last couple years has made me actually take atheism a lot less seriously. And I don't know that you'll like me saying this, but because, atheism is a very well-respected option in academia. But because of your view, this new possibility that God, maybe he's just limited in power and everything else is unlimited, and that accounts for the data just as well. All the data of evil and suffering and even divine hiddenness, it accounts for all of that data. And so why not opt for this option that explains everything that we see, from consciousness to the order in the universe to moral knowledge to all of the psychophysical harmony, all these different things that we see in the world that we observe, it explains all of those. And so you don't have to resort to atheism or be an atheist. You can still have the explanatory resources and have a very robust ontology that can explain things. So it's led me, in short, it's led me to take atheism a little bit less seriously.
Yes, Cameron, if you start removing God's omni-properties, all of a sudden you can make God fit all the data. If you squint in just the right way and turn your head a little bit and then, just don't think about it too much. It's amazing, really. I don't know if Cameron is aware of this, but there are all kinds of different ideas and concepts about God to choose from, even within Christianity, going back to the Gnostics and the Marcionites. Who knew, right? And if you care mostly about your feels and curbing your existential angst, then almost any of these gods will do the trick. And I do mean trick, because there is no one on the planet more easily fooled than yourself. Once again, I'm me. Thanks for watching.